Commander stood in the observation deck of the warship. His crystalline exoskeleton reflected the cold blue light of distant stars. His three eyes focused on the human vessel approaching through the darkness. It was a small freighter that should have been no match for technology, but had learned long ago that humans were never what they seemed. Protocol Officer O stood beside him. Her voice trembled as she spoke. "Tell us again, what happened at station?" Drew a slow breath. His inner eyelids flickered in a gesture that showed deep concern. The memory was still fresh. 3 standard cycles had passed since the incident, yet the fear remained heavy in his mind. "We arrived expecting conquest," began. His voice was deep and measured. "The station had only 200 humans. Their defenses were minimal. Our fleet numbered 20 warships. The Council believed this would be our easiest conquest in the outer territories. No resistance was expected. No losses were anticipated." He paused and let silence fill the space between them. The humans had a captain named Robert. No titles, no formality, just Robert. The message he sent across our communications channel was unexpected. He did not demand negotiations. He did not plead for mercy. Instead, he gave us a warning. This warning would haunt every officer who heard it. O leaned forward. Her antennae quivered with anxiety. "A warning about what?" "About what we would face if we fired upon the station," replied. "He told us that the humans aboard had nothing left to lose. Their families had been evacuated days earlier. They carried no fear because fear requires something to protect. But they did carry something far more dangerous than conventional weapons. They carried absolute conviction." His eyes turned distant. He was lost in the memory of what came next. We did not listen to his warning. The High Command issued the order to begin bombardment. I watched from the tactical station as our energy weapons locked onto the station's hull. The humans should have burned. The station should have collapsed. Everything suggested an easy victory. Our computers calculated the destruction would take less than 40 seconds. The commander's exoskeleton trembled slightly. His voice became harder. Then Robert and his crew did something we had never encountered before. They overloaded their power core with absolute precision, but they did not simply destroy their own station. They had somehow calibrated it to release a cascading electromagnetic pulse that spread across our entire fleet simultaneously. This pulse was calculated to a perfect degree. Every frequency, every wavelength, perfectly timed. O's eyes widened in horror. Impossible. The computational complexity alone would require decades of preparation. The calculations would need a supercomputer to work correctly. "Yes," interrupted. "It would require genius, it would require sacrifice, and it would require a complete understanding of death as a tool rather than a failure." Robert knew his crew would perish. He had accepted this fact, and in accepting it, he had transformed them into something more dangerous than warriors. He had made them into instruments of precision, instruments of destruction. The captain turned away from the viewport. He could not continue looking at the human vessel approaching through the darkness. 15 of our 20 warships lost power simultaneously. The pulse disabled their shields. Their weapons became useless. Their life support systems failed. In those crucial moments when our vessels drifted helpless in the void, the remaining human ships arrived. They had been hiding behind the radiation storms at the system's edge. We never detected them on our scanners. His voice dropped. It was barely above a whisper now. The humans did not destroy our disabled warships outright. Instead, they issued a single transmission. The message was simple and clear. Surrender or watch your crew asphyxiate slowly in the darkness of space. Your choice. Your decision. We had minutes to decide. Our crew would die either way if we did not surrender. We surrendered. The Empire, masters of 17 star systems, had been defeated by 200 humans who chose to become ghosts rather than accept occupation. He turned back to face O. His expression was grave. But that was not the end of it. When our surviving ships returned to space, The military commanders demanded explanations. How could 700 soldiers be defeated by a force of 200 humans? How could advanced technology fall to primitive human determination? How could this happen? Walked across the observation deck. His footsteps echoed in the silence. I provided the analysis. I told them the truth. Humans do not fight based on probability calculations. They do not compute optimal outcomes. They fight based on conviction. They fight because they believe their existence matters. We calculate the best results. They accept only one outcome, survival. That difference across an entire species becomes an asymmetry our technology cannot overcome. Our weapons are superior. Our shields are stronger. Our ships are faster. But our will is not theirs. And in the end, will is the only thing that truly matters in war. The tactical officer who had accompanied on that fateful day stood in the background. He spoke for the first time. What happened to Captain Robert? Did not answer immediately. He stared out at the stars beyond the viewport. Robert died in the explosion. So did all 212 of his crew members. They knew they would die. They accepted this. And they chose their deaths in such a way that it cost us the entire battle. 15 warships lost. 43,000 soldiers dead, countless others wounded, all because humans understood something we did not. What did they understand? O asked. They understood that a species willing to die cannot be conquered through force alone, replied. They understood that surrender is worse than death for a human. They understood that their lives meant nothing compared to their refusal to accept occupation. That knowledge gave them power we could not match with weapons or shields. The commander turned back to face his officers. His 3 eyes were steady now, cold, clear. This is what you must understand about humans. They will fight until the last one is dead. They will sacrifice everything for their freedom. They will destroy themselves rather than surrender. And they will do this with perfect awareness of what they are doing. They choose death. They choose it deliberately. They choose it with their eyes open. He paused and let that truth settle into the minds of every officer present. That is what makes humans so deadly. That is what makes them so difficult to fight. That is what makes them different from every other species we have encountered in our military history. Humans do not fight to win. Humans fight to refuse to lose. And there is a profound difference between those two things. Returned to his command station. The human vessel continued its approach through the darkness. That is the lesson from station. Remember it. Learn from it. Or your name will be carved into a monument alongside the 43,000 soldiers who died because we did not understand what humans truly are. The officers stood in complete silence. They understood now why he had been promoted. They understood why his recommendations carried weight in the highest councils of the empire. He had seen something in the humans that terrified him. And that terror was the most honest assessment any commander could give. 3 cycles after the incident at station, found himself leading a diplomatic mission to the human colony world of Threshold 9. His mandate was clear and simple. Assess the threat level. Report back to the council. Recommend whether further military action was warranted against the human species. The High Command wanted answers about humanity's capabilities. They wanted to know if another attack would succeed where the first had failed. What discovered would change his understanding of combat forever. It would reshape his entire view of what made a species dangerous. The colony was small. The population was approximately 50,000. The humans had spread themselves across a harsh continent of crimson deserts and volcanic activity. The land was brutal. The climate was unforgiving. Humans had been living here for only 12 cycles, yet their infrastructure was remarkable, not because of technological sophistication, but because of ingenuity born from harsh necessity. A human named greeted him upon arrival. She was elderly by human standards. Her skin was weathered by the harsh sun. Her movements were slow but deliberate. She wore no weapon. She carried no guard. Instead, she extended her hand in the human gesture of greeting that had learned to recognize from the incident at station. "Welcome to Threshold 9, she said simply. Her voice was steady and calm. "I suppose you want to know why you shouldn't attack us." Translator processed the words. The directness of her statement caught him off guard. He had expected diplomacy. He had expected careful language. "The Council believes your colony poses a minimal strategic threat," he replied. "This is a diplomatic visit, not a military assessment." Smiled. It was an expression that's facial recognition systems interpreted as knowing amusement. She knew exactly what this visit meant. "Of course," she said, "that is what we would be told too." She led him across the colony. She showed him the water reclamation systems, the agricultural domes, the power generation plants. Everything was functional. Everything was efficient. Everything was completely unremarkable from a technological standpoint. Yet something about the way the humans moved troubled. The way they worked together suggested layers of complexity beneath the surface. They moved with purpose. They moved with awareness. They moved like soldiers disguised as workers. "3 cycles ago," explained as they walked, "we thought this colony was doomed. The volcanic activity increased beyond our geological predictions. We had maybe 18 months before the entire region became uninhabitable. We could have called for evacuation from that evacuation would have taken 2 years. We would have been trapped here. Many of us would have died." They arrived at the edge of a massive chasm. Magma glowed in the depths below. The heat was intense. The radiation levels were high. "So we did something different," continued without hesitation. "We engineered a solution, not a perfect one, but one that worked. We created a network of cooling systems using compressed regolith from the surrounding area. We worked without sleep, without rest, rotating crews in 20-hour shifts. Some of us died from heat exhaustion, some from structural collapses, but we kept building." She pointed to locations throughout the region. Sensors detected the cooling stations. They were invisible to casual observation, but they were unmistakable upon closer analysis. The engineering was crude by standards, yet it had achieved what advanced technology alone could not achieve. It had saved an entire colony. "Why are you telling me this?" asked. He did not understand the purpose of this demonstration. Turned to face him directly. Her eyes were clear and hard. "Because you need to understand something about humans that no military assessment will ever capture. We do not fight to win. We fight because we refuse to lose. And there is a profound difference between those two things. A species can be conquered. They can be defeated. They can surrender. But a species that refuses to lose, that is something your military strategists have no protocols for. That is something that cannot be calculated or predicted or countered with weapons alone." She gestured across the colony. Humans continued their work despite the oppressive heat. They worked in the scorching sunlight. They worked in the volcanic shadows. They worked because stopping was not an option. "Every human here believes in something," said. Her voice was firm. "Not in victory, not in conquest, not in dominance, but in continuation. In the idea that tomorrow will exist and we will be here to see it. That belief is stronger than any weapon you will ever develop. That belief is harder to kill than any physical form. That belief is what makes humans dangerous." Walked among the cooling systems. He examined them closely. They were primitive. They were inefficient by advanced standards, but they worked. They had been built by hands. They had been designed by minds. They had been maintained by willpower. "If the Empire attacked this colony," said, "we would not surrender, we would not flee, we would fight. We would use these systems as weapons. We would destroy them ourselves rather than let you use them. We would kill ourselves rather than surrender. And we would make your occupation so costly that you would eventually withdraw. This is not arrogance. This is certainty. This is something we know about ourselves." Did not respond immediately. He was processing information. He was analyzing what had told him. He was calculating the implications. "The Council will want proof of your capabilities," he said finally. "We do not need to prove anything," replied. "You already know what we are capable of. You experienced it at station. You saw 200 humans defeat your fleet. You saw them accept death rather than surrender. You know what we are. You know what we are willing to do. The question is not what we can do. The question is what you will do with that knowledge. Returned to his vessel that evening. His mind was heavy with understanding. He filed his report to the council. He recommended peaceful coexistence with the human species. He stated that military action against humanity would be costly. He argued that conquest was possible but would require sacrifices the Empire was not prepared to make. The council rejected his recommendation. The military commanders viewed humans as an emerging threat that needed to be eliminated before they could become truly dangerous. They believed one more military campaign would crush human resistance. They believed superior firepower would overcome human determination. Knew they were wrong. He knew humans would not surrender. He knew they would fight until the last one was dead. But he was only one voice in the council chambers, and the military strategists had already decided. The invasion would begin within the year. The humans would be crushed. The threat would be eliminated. Returned to his quarters and waited. He knew what was coming. He had seen it in his eyes. He had seen it in the determination of the human workers. He had seen it in the crude but effective engineering of their cooling systems. The humans were ready for war, and they would not surrender, no matter what the cost, no matter what weapons the Empire brought against them, no matter how many soldiers died. The humans would refuse to lose, and that refusal would change everything. The military campaign against humanity began not with conquest but with calculated devastation. The Empire attacked 7 human worlds simultaneously. The goal was clear: cripple human expansion before it could threaten hegemony. Destroy the human threat at its foundation. End the resistance before it became unmanageable. The colony world of New Haven was designated for complete elimination. It had a population of 400,000. It had extensive mining operations and manufacturing facilities. It had military installations and defensive weapons. The council believed destroying New Haven would break human resolve. Watch from the flagship as the bombardment commenced. 70 warships descended upon the planet. Their weapons tore through the planetary shields like they were made of air. The human defensive force numbered fewer than 10,000 soldiers. The invasion force exceeded 300,000 troops. Victory was assured. The mathematics were certain. The odds were impossible to overcome. Yet as observed the tactical displays, something unexpected occurred. The humans were not defending their major population centers. Instead, they were systematically destroying them. Entire cities were demolishing themselves from the inside. Massive explosions leveled factories and warehouses. Agricultural domes collapsed deliberately. Mining equipment was destroyed with precision. Report demanded of his tactical officer. His voice was sharp with concern. The humans are initiating controlled demolition of all major infrastructure, the officer replied. Confusion was evident in his tone. They are destroying their own cities. They are destroying their own industries. They are destroying their own resources. It makes no tactical sense. Why would they eliminate their own supply lines before we even landed? Understood before his officer could complete the analysis. The humans were not fighting to preserve their civilization. They were fighting to deny it to their enemy. By destroying their own infrastructure, they eliminated the supply lines that an occupying force would need. They removed the resources that would support soldiers. They left nothing for the invaders to use. This was not standard military strategy. This was total refusal to be occupied. This was humans saying we will burn everything rather than let you have it. General or led the invasion force. He was an experienced military commander. He had conquered planets before. He quickly adapted his strategy. He shifted focus from capturing intact cities to establishing military strongpoints in the devastated regions. His troops would build new supply lines. They would construct new bases. They would impose control through military presence alone. What followed was a campaign of bitter street-by-street fighting. The combat should have been a massacre. Soldiers were superior in every measurable way. They had better armor. They had better weapons. They had better training. The outcome seemed certain. But then the humans emerged from underground bunkers. They came from tunnel systems that honeycombed beneath the devastated cities. They carried weapons that were barely more than sharpened metal. They carried mining tools converted into brutal instruments of war. They carried explosives made from industrial chemicals. They fought with a ferocity that military prediction. When cornered by superior forces, they did not surrender. When overwhelmed by numbers, they did not retreat. Instead, they detonated explosive charges that killed themselves and their attackers alike. They chose death over capture. They chose destruction over submission. Received a transmission from one of the human commanders. His name was David. The message was brief and chilling and absolutely terrifying. We will die before we surrender. We will take as many of you with us as possible. This is not a negotiation. This is not a threat. This is a promise. We made this promise to ourselves the day you began your bombardment. We have accepted our deaths. The question is whether you are willing to accept yours. The forces pressed forward despite the resistance. Losses mounted on both sides. Soldiers died in the rubble of human cities. Human soldiers died in the tunnels beneath the earth. The mathematics of warfare suggested the should still prevail. Numbers alone dictated victory. They had 300,000 troops. The humans had far fewer. Eventually, simple attrition would win the day. Then the humans revealed their true strategy. They had been preparing for this attack. They had been planning for years. They had hidden weapons caches throughout the planet. They had seeded explosives in key geological locations. They had created maps of every weak point in New Haven's tectonic structure. As the forces consolidated their position around the colony's central hub, the humans detonated the planet's geothermal network. The tectonic manipulation was not designed to destroy the planet. It was designed to create massive earthquakes and volcanic eruptions across the entire region where forces were concentrated. 30,000 soldiers died in the geological devastation. They were crushed beneath falling buildings. They were burned by lava flows. They were swallowed by the earth itself. The scale of the destruction was staggering. The human forces, having studied the planet's systems for months and years, had positioned themselves in reinforced bunkers that could withstand the catastrophe. They had drilled. They had prepared. They had calculated every detail with precision. When the earth shook, they survived. When the volcanoes erupted, they were safe in their underground fortresses. The invaders, accustomed to fighting in open terrain, accustomed to the advantage of superior numbers, were annihilated. They had nowhere to shelter. They had nowhere to run. The earth beneath their feet became their grave. General or transmitted a withdrawal order. The surviving forces retreated from New Haven. They left behind their wounded soldiers. They left behind their dead. They left behind their dreams of conquest. They left behind the belief that superior technology and military force could overcome human determination. When reports of the defeat reached the military commanders demanded explanations. How could 700,000 soldiers be repelled by a force less than 30,000 strong? How could advanced technology fall to primitive determination? How could this be possible? The casualties were staggering. 43,000 dead at Station, 30,000 dead at New Haven, hundreds of thousands wounded across multiple worlds. The Empire had suffered its greatest military defeat in recorded history, and it had been defeated by humans, fragile humans with primitive weapons and unconquerable spirits. Was summoned to the High Council chambers. Military commanders surrounded him. They demanded answers. They demanded explanations. He provided his analysis in a single paragraph that would be remembered forever. Humans do not fight based on probability calculations. They do not fight based on odds or strategic advantage. They fight based on conviction. They fight based on the absolute certainty that their existence matters. We calculate optimal outcomes. They accept only one outcome: survival. That difference across an entire species becomes an asymmetry our technology cannot overcome. Our weapons can kill them. Our shields can protect us. Our ships can fly faster, but our will is not their will, and the will of humans is the most powerful force in the galaxy. Empire recalled its fleets. The invasion was declared a strategic withdrawal. Everyone understood the truth, though no one said it aloud. Humanity had defeated the greatest military power in the known galaxy, and the galaxy would never be the same again. After the defeat at New Haven, the Council attempted a different approach. Military conquest had failed. Technological superiority had been rendered useless. Direct confrontation had resulted in staggering losses, so they chose diplomacy instead. Was promoted to chief diplomatic envoy. His mandate was clear and direct. Establish communication with humanity's leadership. Negotiate terms that would prevent further human expansion. Preserve honor while avoiding another catastrophic military conflict. The Council believed diplomacy could accomplish what weapons could not. Was to bring humanity to heel through negotiation, or die trying in the attempt. The human delegation met him on neutral ground. The location was a space station orbiting the colony world of Sanctuary. The lead negotiator was a woman named Caroline. She was middle-aged by human standards. Her skin was weathered but not old. Her eyes held keen intellect. She demonstrated intelligence in every gesture and every word she spoke. She wore no military uniform. She carried no visible weapon. She came with 4 advisors and an open demeanor. Was accompanied by 6 military officers. They were present to observe. They were present to assess human intentions. They were present as a show of force. The first hours of negotiation were formalities. The humans asked about intentions for the future. They inquired about human territorial ambitions and expansion plans. Everything was measured. Everything was careful. Everything was professional and distant. Then Caroline said something that changed the nature of the conversation entirely. "We have studied you," she stated plainly. Her voice was calm and direct. "We have studied your culture. We have studied your history. We have studied your military doctrine from the earliest wars your species ever fought. Do you want to know what we have discovered?" His inner eyelids flickered with uncertainty. "Elaborate." "The Empire has never faced a species that refuses to surrender," Caroline said. She accessed a data display. Historical records of military campaigns appeared on the screen. Dozens of conquered worlds, hundreds of subjugated species, an empire built on military dominance and technological superiority. Every enemy you have defeated shared a common trait. They valued their civilization more than they valued their continued existence. So when you threatened their civilization, they surrendered to preserve it. They chose survival over pride. They chose subjugation over annihilation. She turned the display to show the New Haven campaign. The devastation was visible in the images. The destruction was almost total. Humans value existence itself more than any particular form of civilization, Caroline continued. That is the fundamental difference. That is what you do not understand. That is what no computer model can predict. Humans will destroy everything rather than be conquered. We will burn our own cities. We will poison our own water. We will kill our own children rather than let them grow up under rule. That is not a metaphor. That is not an exaggeration. That is the actual truth of what humans will do. She leaned forward and made direct eye contact with. That is why you lost at New Haven. That is why you lost at Station. That is why you will lose in any future conflict with humans, not because our weapons are better, not because our ships are faster, not because our technology is superior, but because we refuse to lose, and a species that refuses to lose cannot be conquered through force. One of the military officers stood abruptly. His voice was harsh. "What do you propose?" Caroline's expression did not change. She remained calm and composed. I propose we define a boundary, she said. Humans remain in this region of space. Remain in that region. We do not cross into each other's territories. We do not attack. We do not expand. We trade. We communicate. We coexist. This way, neither of us needs to fight. This way, no more soldiers need to die. The officer who had spoken earlier leaned forward with aggression evident in his posture. And if the council rejects this proposal, what happens then? Caroline's response was delivered with absolute certainty. Her voice did not waver. Then we will continue as we have been. You will attempt conquest. We will refuse surrender. Humans will die. Thousands will die. Millions will die. Eventually, someone in the council will make the calculation that peace is preferable to endless war, and we will arrive at the same agreement I am proposing now. The only difference will be how many graves were dug first. The only difference will be how many families were destroyed. The only difference will be how much of the galaxy was set on fire. She stood and extended her hand too. Or you can be wise now. You can accept the boundary now. You can preserve the lives of your soldiers now. You can prevent the suffering now. The choice is yours, but I assure you the outcome will be the same. Humans will not be conquered. You can accept that now or accept it after decades of war, but you will accept it. Made his decision in that moment. He would recommend the proposal to the council, not because he believed the humans lacked the capability to wage endless war against the Empire, but because he understood something that most military strategists did not understand. Humans were not the strongest species in the galaxy by any objective measure. They did not possess the most advanced technology. They did not have the largest population. They did not command the greatest resources, but they possessed something far more valuable than any of those things. They possessed the absolute conviction that their existence mattered. They possessed the willingness to sacrifice everything to prove it. They possessed the ability to accept death as the price of freedom, and that ability gave them power that no weapon could match. Returned to the and presented his analysis to the High Council. He recommended acceptance of Caroline's proposal. He argued that the mathematics of conquest did not apply to humans. He stated that continued war would drain resources without achieving victory. Some council members listened. Others dismissed his recommendations as the musings of a commander who had lost his nerve. But gradually, the evidence became undeniable. The financial cost of continued warfare was unsustainable. The loss of military personnel was damaging to society. The possibility of ultimate victory was essentially zero. The Empire accepted Caroline's proposal. A boundary was established. Humans remained in their region of space, remained in theirs. A fragile peace was negotiated. Trade routes were established. Communication channels were opened. The war was over, not because the Empire had won, not because the humans had surrendered, but because someone, finally, had recognized that human refusal to lose was absolute and unbreakable. Someone had finally accepted that some species cannot be conquered. Some species can only be coexisted with or destroyed, and destruction would cost more than coexistence. Watched from his diplomatic vessel as the first human trade ship passed through territory. The sight filled him with a strange combination of relief and dread. Relief that the killing was over. Dread at what humanity would eventually become if they continued to grow unchecked in their region of space. He had learned a crucial lesson, and that lesson would shape his actions for the rest of his life. 10 cycles had passed since the peace agreement was signed between humanity and the Empire. A new generation of officers had risen to prominence. Many of them were dismissing the warnings of the previous era as exaggerated wartime rhetoric. Some whispered about the vulnerability the Empire had shown. Some whispered that with proper strategy, they could have annihilated humanity before the humans ever became a true threat. These officers had not been present at station. They had not seen 30,000 of their own soldiers buried beneath the earth at New Haven. They had not walked through the ruins of human cities or witnessed the determination in the eyes of human soldiers. They knew the history. They had read the reports, but knowledge from reading is not the same as knowledge from experience. Was ancient now by most standards. His exoskeleton had dulled with age. His eyes had dimmed slightly. His movements were slower, but his mind remained sharp. His memory remained clear, and his understanding of human nature had only deepened with the passage of time. He had been summoned by the High Council to address the cohort of military academy graduates. 300 of them stood before him in perfect formation. Their exoskeletons were polished to mirror brightness. Their minds were eager to discuss strategy and tactics. Their confidence in superiority was unshaken. They did not know what it meant to lose. They did not understand what defeat felt like. Began his address quietly. He spoke without ceremonial flourish or military formality. I have fought in 18 military campaigns across 12 star systems, he said. His voice was steady and clear. I have seen species destroy themselves rather than surrender. I have witnessed civilizations choose extinction over transformation. I have observed the death of entire worlds and the subjugation of countless populations, but I have never witnessed anything like humanity. He paced before the assembled officers. He moved slowly but with purpose. He ensured that each one understood the gravity of his words. You have been taught that military strategy is a calculation of force, resources, and probability, he said. This is true for most species. The mathematics of war are reliable. The equations are predictable. Superior force defeats inferior force. Larger armies defeat smaller armies. Better technology defeats primitive technology. This is how war works. He paused and allowed that truth to settle into their minds. But these calculations fail when confronting a species that refuses to be calculated, he continued. Humans do not think in terms of optimal outcomes. They do not process warfare as a mathematical equation to be solved. They think in terms of acceptable outcomes, and they have an unusual definition of acceptable. For humans, the only acceptable outcome is survival. Existence continues. The species persists. Those are the only outcomes they will accept. Activated a display showing footage from the New Haven campaign. It showed human soldiers fighting in the ruins of their own cities, fighting with weapons that were barely more than sharpened metal and improvised explosives, fighting despite overwhelming disadvantage, fighting despite the certainty of defeat. They could have surrendered, he said. Their species would have continued. They would have been displaced. They would have been reduced to subjugation and servitude, but they would have survived as a species. The government would have changed. The system would have changed. The culture might have changed, but humans would have existed somewhere in territory. He advanced the display to show the faces of human commanders and soldiers. Men and women of all ages, all backgrounds, all united by a single conviction. But they chose a different path, he said. They chose to make occupation so costly that we would withdraw voluntarily. They chose to sacrifice their cities and their resources to deny them to us. They chose to die rather than accept defeat. This is not a military strategy. This is not a calculation based on profit and loss. This is mathematics based on absolute refusal. The elderly commander stepped directly before the assembled officers, his 3 eyes fixed upon them with intensity. What makes humans dangerous is not their technology, he said. What makes them dangerous is their refusal to accept defeat even in the face of absolute military superiority. They would rather die than surrender, and a species willing to die cannot be conquered through force alone. They will fight until the last one is dead. They will choose death rather than occupation. They will burn everything rather than let you have it. He began to walk back and forth before them. His voice grew harder and more direct. I tell you this not to glorify humanity, he continued. I tell you this not to demean our military tradition or suggest that superiority is a myth. I tell you this because understanding your true enemies is the only path to survival. The Empire made a strategic miscalculation when we invaded human space. We believed we could defeat any species through superior firepower and tactical awareness, but we encountered a species for whom those calculations meant nothing. He gestured toward the display showing human soldiers in the ruins. "If you take nothing else from my address, remember this one thing," said. His voice was low and intense. "A species that refuses to lose is far more dangerous than a species that fights to win. A species that fights to win will calculate when victory is no longer achievable and will retreat. A species that refuses to lose will continue fighting until all are dead. That difference is the difference between victory and absolute destruction. Plan your strategies accordingly, or you will repeat the mistakes of the past." The commander paused. His next words carried the weight of absolute certainty. The Empire learned this lesson at a cost of millions of lives. We learned it at the cost of military fleets and industrial resources. We learned it at the cost of our pride, but we learned it, and that learning has preserved us. That learning has prevented further wars. That learning has allowed us to coexist with humanity rather than be destroyed by them. He looked directly at the assembled officers. His ancient eyes held knowledge that could not be taught in academies or learned from tactics manuals. "Humans will grow," he said. "They will expand. They will become more advanced. They will develop weapons that rival our own. And they will do all of this while maintaining the absolute conviction that their existence matters more than any command or demand. You cannot change this. You cannot defeat this through strategy or superior force. You can only accept it and learn to live with it." His voice became quieter but more intense. "There are species in the galaxy that can be conquered. There are species that can be defeated and made to surrender, but humans are not among them. Humans will fight until the last one is dead. They will destroy themselves rather than accept defeat. They will choose death over subjugation. This is not a weakness. This is their greatest strength. This is what makes them undefeatable." The commander took a single step back from the assembled officers. "I have told you what happened at Station. I have told you what happened at New Haven. I have told you what every officer in the military has been told. The question now is whether you will learn from this knowledge or ignore it, whether you will respect human determination or dismiss it as exaggeration, whether you will honor the boundaries we negotiated or push against them looking for weakness." He paused and let absolute silence fill the auditorium. "The choice you make will determine whether the peace lasts or whether we descend into war again. And if we descend into war again, remember my words. Humans will not surrender. Humans will not accept defeat. Humans will fight until the very end. And the end will come not because we defeated them, but because we finally accepted that some species cannot be conquered. Some species can only be coexisted with or destroyed, and the price of destruction is too high." Left the podium. He walked slowly from the auditorium. Behind him, 300 young officers stood in silence. The weight of his words had settled upon them. The truth had been delivered not as a warning but as a reality that they would have to accept and learn to live with. In the years that followed, those officers would rise to prominence in the military. Some would remember his words. Others would forget them. But all of them would eventually come to understand the truth of what he had told them. Humans could not be conquered. Humans would not surrender. Humans would fight until the last one was dead. And the galaxy would have to learn to live with that fact or be destroyed by it. The peace held. The boundaries remained. Trade flourished. Communication channels stayed open. And in the far reaches of space, humans continued their expansion, continued their growth, continued their refusal to accept limitation. While in space, officers studied the history of the failed invasions and recognized the truth in every word had spoken. Some species can be defeated, some can be conquered, but humans could only be coexisted with, and that coexistence would define the future of the galaxy for centuries to come.